How's it going, everyone? My name is Donovan, and in this video I'm going to go over 5 tips for how to make someone happy. So it's a pretty common position to be in where someone around you is struggling or unhappy and you want to do what you can to help them feel better. Now, the ideal situation would be that you can just do something that instantly makes them feel happy. And that's what a lot of the articles you'll see if you search for this say, is stuff like, here's 20 ways to make someone happy. But then it has stuff in it like, take them for a walk or buy them a treat. And these strategies aren't necessarily getting at the root of the question. And there may be some circumstances where these little trinkets or novelties help, and they do something, but it's really not the answer to the question, how do I make someone else happy? Now, the first thing before I go into the tips that I have for how to make someone happy is to recognize that you can't make someone happy, right? There's no way that you can force someone into a happy state. It really depends on what's going on for them in their internal landscape. So what you can do for their mind is set them up in a position where they're most likely to experience happiness, right? You're not going to be able to force it. And some people really get into a position where they're trying so hard to make someone happy and it's not working and they feel like it's their fault. The bottom line is, no matter what, it's not your fault or responsibility if someone else isn't happy. Now, that being said, there are things that we can do, like I was saying, to kind of increase the chance that people around us will be happy. And there are certain things that we can do to be intentional about creating an environment that's conducive to happiness. So that's what I'm going to focus on in this video, is 5 tips for creating an environment around you so that other people can be happy, or more specifically, focusing on one person and helping them to be happy. Again, this is not a for sure thing. It's just a way to make their environment a little bit better. Another important point to keep in mind is that unhappiness is an important state for being alive. So if someone experiences some transient amount of unhappiness, that's to be expected. That's part of life. We can't go through life always happy. So if someone close to you is unhappy, there are things we can do, but you shouldn't expect them to be happy all the time, or expect to be able to act in a way that you allow them to be happy all the time. It's just not realistic. Now, that being said, a lot of people fall into these traps where they're unhappy for much of the time, and there's a lot we can do there. But I just also wanted to point out that expecting no unhappiness is really unrealistic. All right, so let's get into the tips or the ideas for being able to make an environment conducive to happiness. The first thing to do is to make sure that you acknowledge and validate the experience of the person that you're with. So one really common problem that happens in relationships is that one person will be struggling with something in particular, and the other person tries to solve the problem or tries to help them before even really understanding the position, or even if they do understand the position, without making the person feel like they've been heard. And when you're in a place of unhappiness, depending on the severity, that can be especially challenging and make the situation much worse. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when communicating with someone and trying to help them work through something that's causing unhappiness is to make sure you really acknowledge and validate their experience. Now, this doesn't mean you have to agree with every single thing they say. You just need to communicate in a way that shows that you're listening and care about what they're saying. So I think, for one example, maybe somebody's having trouble with their weight, it's making them unhappy, and they just talk about they have these cravings for junk food all the time. You want to start by saying, like, okay, I hear that you have these cravings. Like, those cravings sound difficult for you, right? Things like that show that you have heard what they're saying. You're not necessarily agreeing. You're not saying, hey, you know what? Those impulses, they run your life. There's nothing you can do about it. But you're saying, okay, I understand this is hard for you. And that level of acknowledgement and validation for many experiences can make them a lot better and can open up the space to do some of the more serious work or some of the more action-oriented work that often comes from trying to resolve these sorts of problems. The second tip is to make sure that you're trying to help at the appropriate level. So once you have kind of built this baseline of understanding and shown that you really care about the issue, the next thing is to make sure you're working at the right level. And this is why I don't really like those little lists of, like, buy a treat, go on a walk. These small things may or may not be at the right level for what the person needs to remove this blocker to happiness. So, for example, if someone's suffering from clinical depression and you tell them something like, oh, eat a piece of chocolate, that may produce some very small minor dopamine hit, but it's not really the solution to the problem. It's not going to cause them to be happy again. It's only going to temporarily change the state that they're in. So, a really important thing is when you're helping someone with this to understand at what level the problem is. Like maybe it's that somebody got cut off on traffic and they're frustrated. The problem there, what needs to be changed is just that heightened emotional state. That's not something that's going to carry with them for years and years and years. So there are different kinds of problems that require different kinds of solutions. And just reaching for, hey, there's this very small, minor 2-second thing that could help for a little bit isn't always the right choice. Now, sometimes it is. Sometimes it completely is. But it's about understanding the difference between these different levels. Now, that might sound a little bit scary to try to figure out how to parse what level of help they need, but don't be afraid to actually ask the person. I mean, I'm assuming you're trying to make someone happy that you have some sort of relationship with. And if that's the case, you can ask them what they need. And if you need, kind of a high level hierarchy, you can ask if it's at like an existential or purpose level or an emotional level or a physical level, like what kind of help they might need. And the person, in a lot of situations, will be able to guide you towards the type of thing that they might need. Now, sometimes, some people don't know, they may not be as forthcoming. In these situations, whatever little pieces you can chip away really help. So that's a very, very important tip, I think, is to make sure you're working at the right level for the problem instead of, just always defaulting to these small little things, because a lot of times they're not resolving the underlying issue. These can be some big issues, but if you're doing work at least in the right place, it's helpful. The third tip for helping people kind of become happier is to help them analyze what's working and what's not. So in all of our lives, there's a certain structure or a certain mix of aspects that are going well and aspects that are not going as well. And sometimes we kind of mesh them together, right? And when you're really unhappy, you might feel, oh, my entire life is not working. In reality, you start picking it apart and maybe a lot of the pieces aren't working, but some things are. So acting as kind of a sounding board to help someone kind of parse those pieces out and figure out, okay, this thing is working, this thing is working, this thing is not, that can help them get on the path to figuring out what they need to become happy again, or more realistically, to become happy more of the time. And this process can be really hard by yourself. So as an outside party, you can easily see things that they may not be able to. Now, it may be a little bit of work kind of coming to the bottom of some of the issues, and you may not get through some of that depending on how strong the relationship is. But helping them pull those pieces apart at least helps them get a clearer idea of what different parts are influencing them and how strongly. And that leads me to the fourth tip, which is to break down what they can do based on that analysis and help them brainstorm ideas and other action steps. So once you kind of know what the problem is and at what level it exists, you can look for the most fitting tools. And most of the time, the person to become happy is going to need to do their own work. There's going to be some amount of process, some stuff that they have to do. But you can make it easier by helping them find the tools, by encouraging them, by showing them the ways to be more consistent, or helping them to use different tools or be open to new ideas. So it's really important that if you're unhappy, you find things to at least try and experiment with to increase your happiness. So as an outside resource, you're in a good position to really help guide them closer to the things that they need. And this is so much easier once you've done the analysis, right? Because then you're not going, okay, you're not feeling happy, here's a treat, when maybe they're feeling unhappy about their weight. There's something that you can pinpoint once you've done the analysis that will be much more useful than just shooting in the dark, trying to help with no real idea of what's going on. The fifth tip to helping others become happier is to enlist other resources or experts as needed. So as you go through this process, it's pretty likely that you're going to run into a point that you don't really know what to do, or you don't have all the expertise to help the other person become happy. So let's say, for example, that they suffer from anxiety, and that's really a serious problem for them, but you don't know how to deal with that. it's possible that after you help them look for some tools, you may want to look for someone else or some other specific resource that's really strong in that area to help them. It's not on you to know everything about everything, but you can help a lot by finding the right expert or the right source of knowledge for them to work through the problem. Again, this whole process, all these tips are about what you can do to foster an environment where the person is able to work through the problems more easily. There is no way that you can solve the problems for them in most cases. A lot of the time, it's going to be something that you can't really control. And the best thing you can do is to help inject a little bit more advice, help, knowledge, resources into the equation to get them to that place a little bit faster. All in all, those are the 5 tips that I think are going to help the most with trying to help someone else become happier. Like I've mentioned a bunch of times, it's not something that you can force or ensure will happen, but there are definitely things you can do to increase the chances that they're able to find that path. So, as usual, I like to add a couple reflection questions, and for this video, they are: 1. Who in your life most needs your help right now? 2. How can you help foster their happiness? So hopefully that gives you a couple ideas for how to kind of pinpoint some problems that other people are facing and help them at the right level so that they can start down the path towards recovering or increasing their happiness. That's all I've got for this video. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, put them down in the box below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And I will see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.